Hi, everybody. Welcome to today's presentation. We still have some people logging in, so we will wait just a moment while we let people log in. In the meantime, jump into the chat, change the setting to everyone, and tell us where you're logging in from today. Dallas, Texas. Thank you, Lucas.
Hi, Lucas. It's nice to see you.
Jay from Team Clio joining us from Toronto, Canada. We'll give everybody 30 more seconds and then we'll begin. Erin, thank you for joining us from the Twin Cities. Okay. Well, why don't we go ahead and begin, Erin? Do you want to take it away?
Yeah, that sounds great. So today we are going to be covering insights from the 2022 Clio Legal Trends Report. Today, we're mostly going to be summarizing some key facts here, some of the data-driven findings and how those can be applied within your law firm. First, just a couple of quick housekeeping notes. I know we've all done a ton of webinars, so we're very familiar with this. But if you need to ask questions, there's actually a Q&A section in Zoom. So post your questions there. We have a moderator behind the scenes who will be calling those out. We'll try to answer some during the webinar, but we're going to try to save time to answer those at the end. If you want to add comments, go ahead and put those in the comments section. Just make sure that you're notifying who you want the audience to be for your comment. If it's everyone, just the host and the panelists, things like that. At the end of the webinar, a survey is going to pop up. If you could please answer that survey, it's just going to help us better deliver content to you in the future. I know Clio does a great job at really listening to feedback and making sure that future content is exactly what people are looking for. And note that this webinar is being recorded and the slides will be emailed to you in the next day or so. So watch your email for that.
So I'm Joshua Lenon, the lawyer in residence at Clio, and for the past decade, it's been my privilege to help research the intersection of the practice of law and technology, including contributing to each legal trends report.
And I'm Erin from Uptime Legal Systems. We're Clio's 2022 Partner of the Year, and I review Clio's Legal Trends Report with an eye for how we can help our clients utilize technology to capitalize on those key trends. So what we're going to be reviewing today is first an introduction to the Legal Trends Report. I'm sure most of you are very familiar with it. Some of you might not be. So we're going to do a quick introduction on what it is. What kind of research does it contain? Where does the data come from? And then we're going to focus on two key areas of research today. There is a ton more covered in the Legal Trends Report. So please download that, check it out. I know we're going to be posting a link or two for you to easily access that. The first of today's topics is key metrics, which have some really unique shifts happening in this past year. I'm really excited to share those with you and talk about how legal technology can help you with those. So we're going to drill into those, see what the big changes in those metrics are, why it's really exciting to law firms. And then we're going to take a look at the new work era that we've entered and talk about who is succeeding in this new work era and how being cloud first is bringing lawyers and their clients together. And then just to wrap everything up in a nice little bow for the holidays, we're going to sum all that up for you with some key takeaways, and hopefully we'll have some time for questions at the end as well. So just to kick things off, Joshua here is going to introduce the Legal Trends Report for you guys.
Thanks, Erin. So I'm going to venture a guess and say, just like Erin did, that you're familiar with the Legal Trends Report. And the reason I made that guess is because we're actually talking about our 7th annual edition, which is a huge milestone for us. And we're thrilled to be building on the research that began all the way back in 2016 and has evolved year over year as we examine different angles and questions that come from the data. So Those angles and questions are what we're going to be looking at today in the 2022 edition of the Legal Trends Report. Now, first, I think you need to know how we build the Legal Trends Report and the data behind it. So the first set of data that we use is aggregated and anonymized app data contributed by tens of thousands of legal professionals across the United States. This is a data set that's unique to Clio, but is rapidly becoming the benchmark for the entire legal industry. Now, it's important for us to clarify, though, that this is Clio usage data. This is not your case files. So what we look at are things like how people are using Clio, what are settings that have been set in Clio, and from there, even with that limited, tiny slice of view, we're able to actually find amazing insights into the practice of law. However, oftentimes this data raises more questions than answers. So in order for us to get a full picture, we've been supplementing this data with surveys of legal professionals who are both Clio customers and are not. And in addition to, we also survey consumers of legal services, so clients and potential clients, to see how we might answer the questions that that data is raising. Lastly, we've been continuing our longitudinal study where we take a look at a group of over 1,600 law firms and monitor their changes over time. And something new this year is we've been looking at location data. This is, again, aggregated and anonymized data, but it's looking at IP addresses and the geographic locations that's associated with them to see how and where lawyers are working and how that has changed from over time. Let's dive into some quick insights from past legal trends reports. From 2016, the first thing we did was we introduced the law firm funnel. And Erin?
So the primary takeaway that we're going to get to, spoiler alert for everybody, from the 2022 Legal Trends Report is that it's all about cloud. So to give some context to the 2022 findings, Josh was going to go through some information that Clio started way back in 2016 when they first did the Legal Trends Report. So talking about law firm KPIs and the law firm funnel.
So what is the law firm funnel? What we discovered way back in 2016 is that what lawyers were reporting as a part of surveys, especially a big law, in terms of the number of hours they were billing, didn't line up with the practice data that we were seeing in Clio. And there are three key rates that we've discovered. The first is utilization rate. How many hours in a work day are you billing? The realization rate of those billed hours, how many of them end up on a bill? And then collection rate of those hours that end up on a bill, how much of that is getting paid by the client? And shockingly, we found that utilization rate was less than a third of your day is being spent on billable work on average. And so in 2016, this is what the law firm day looked like. On average, most lawyers tell us they work an 8-hour day. Some days are longer, some weeks are longer. But then when you subtract all those hours that aren't being spent on billable work, you're left with 2.24 hours a day. Then lawyers give themselves a haircut where they actually take time off of the bill, usually for empathy for the client. And then you're left with 1.8 hours a day are being billable work. And then when you send that bill to the client, they don't pay the entire bill. And so lawyers in 2016 were only getting paid for 1.5 hours a day, an hour and a half of work out of an entire 8-hour day, which left over 6 hours missing. Through our research and up to 2021, we found that lawyers have been improving on this, but it's still a huge chunk of their day that's missing. So what happens to those missing 6 hours? Well, our hypothesis was that lawyers either had too much time being taken up by administrative work or not enough clients to support administrative work. And what we found is that administrative work, tasks like office administration, generating bills, collections, took up about half of your non-billable time, while a third went to business development. And these are all necessary tasks, but they aren't necessarily the strengths of lawyers. And so how can we begin taking a look at these metrics and figuring out how to adjust our workflows such that we get to be lawyers and not necessarily office administrators. And that leads us to the 2022 key metrics. Erin?
So now we're going to focus on the lawyer funnel that Joshua just talked to you guys about, but with the 2022 numbers. So Joshua, take that away.
You got it. So one of the more amazing things that we've seen is there's been a big change since 2019. So starting with the last quarter of 2019, what we've seen is there are some really interesting metrics that have changed. For example, the number of matters opened has increased on average 20%. Billable hours logged has increased 35%. Hours billed increased 36%. And money collected increased an enormous 45%. And what that tells us is that since the pandemic starting in early 2020, legal has not just recovered, but is growing. Matters are up 10% over average, and revenue collected is up 31% over average. So a huge change in just a couple of years. So why has it changed? That's the question that we need to figure out. So if we go back to our KPIs and our key performance indicators, what we see is that we, being a bit of a detective, we're able to see some changes from our KPI indicators over time, and that these can tell us where this extra revenue, this increase in matters are coming from. And what we see, if you remember the 2016, is that there have been enormous changes in how a lawyer's day worked. We've gone from 28% for our utilization rate to now 33% in just a handful of years. It's actually even changed greater than 2021's numbers. If we look at our 2021 numbers, the law firm funnel, what we see is that lawyers were on average billing 2.4 hours a day, getting paid for billing 1.9 and collecting 1.6, still better than 2016. But then when we jump, sorry, I'm getting through some animations here, to 2022, now we've seen that same 8 hours, we've gone from 2.4 hours to 2.64 hours utilized. It doesn't seem like a lot, but small incremental changes can really add up. In addition, we've seen an increase in our hours realized. There are 2.2 hours realized now rather than 1.9. And we're now collecting on a full 2 hours per day, meaning that lawyers, if we carry this across, these changes are actually getting paid for almost an additional 2.5 hours per week. Erin?
And that might seem like not very much when you're comparing it just to the, how many hours are collected. But these small changes add up to huge gains. So think about if your billable rate is about $300 an hour, you're making an extra $750 a week or $3,000 a month, which is about an extra $36,000 a year. So you can see how that tiny little change makes up a large amount of money.
And this utilization rate jump is the biggest we've seen to date. It's a 6% change, which is greater than any change in utilization rate that we've seen prior in any legal trends report. So it's a big change, and it's paying off for law firms in a huge amount. Again, 31% increase in revenue compared to 2019. So we have some hypotheses about what's going on here. And the first, I think, is lawyers are getting better at delegating. Either they're using third-party services or technology to delegate those administrative tasks and business development tasks that were eating those missing 6 hours. And it's something that I don't know we've actually haven't seen before. But what we also think is happening is there was a bit of a gold rush going on in the time period we were measuring here, which is, again, most of 2021 and all of 2021 and most of 2022 for this data. There's been a huge increase in the number of matters coming into law firms, and that is going to lead to an increase in revenue. In fact, at the account level in 2022, we've seen an average monthly increase of about $10,000 to $12,000 per account, What we do know is that money is rushing in, but what I can't tell you is this sustainable? And so we do think law firms need to be prepared for the end of a gold rush and a bit of a bust and boom cycle. Does that mean we're heading into a recession like several economists are predicting? We don't have that insight. This data is what's called a lagging indicator. It tells us what's happened, not what's going to happen. But we do know this is an unprecedented time of plenty for many legal professionals, and we have to wonder if that will drop off, and if so, when and by how much. And I think that's an excellent segue into our next section, but let's let Erin tell us how you can really take advantage of the same opportunities that we see in these numbers.
Yeah, thanks, Joshua. So as Joshua just said, there's a gold rush and it might be ending sometime soon. But the one key factor here is that all of that revenue isn't necessarily going to disappear if we can really capitalize on those efficiencies, if we can continue delegating some of these administrative tasks so that attorneys can actually bill more hours per day. So the data is showing an increased utilization in hours, and the gap between utilized hours and billable hours is closing. We can tie that to increased reliance on technology to streamline tasks, create efficiencies, and reduce overall administrative work. So on the slide, you can see a few ways that technology can really help you do that, so that when the bust happens, when the gold rush ends, you can make sure that your firm is somewhat protected because you've capitalized on those efficiencies so that you can continue to bill more hours than you were before.
And I think that leads us into our next section.
Yeah, exactly. So things change, right? I know that that's kind of shocking, especially in this fluid time of COVID. You might have noticed some things are changing in the last few years, certainly when it comes to the way we work, where we're working. So while we can't always predict when and where these changes are going to occur, we can tell you that cloud adopters are the law firms that are going to succeed in this new work era. And Joshua is going to tell us a little bit more about the data-driven facts behind that.
Yeah. And so before we even get to the cloud, I think we have to start with something that we found in our survey of lawyers that really jumped out to us. 1 in 5 lawyers left a job last year. That's nearly 20%. And interestingly, 9% plan to leave a job in the next 6 months. That's 30% of legal professionals that are telling us that they either have changed their job or they're going to change their job. And why are they making these changes? They're either making these changes for 1, better pay, or 2, better work-life balance. And they're tied. It's either lawyers are saying, you're taking so much of my time and impacting the quality of my life that you should be paying me more, or they're saying my life is worth prioritizing, and I'm going to find a job and a career that actually allow me to have a work-life balance. When we look at some contributing factors to that, number 2 was that they weren't really a fan of the firm. Number 3 was their manager. Number 4 was their dislike of the type of work. Well, what we're seeing, I think, is that lawyers are finding out that there's a more fulfilling way to practice law, whether it's a different practice area, whether it's a different law firm. We see that lawyers are designing their own perfect practice as they move forward. And some of the things that are really just not working for them are things that they're trying to find reasons to change. So what are they looking to change? Well, there are 2 things. First, 59% of lawyers tell us that they work over 40 hours a week. And there are 2 ways that happens. The first of which is that they're working more throughout the day. So when we compare lawyers to other professional services, what we found is that lawyers report the times that they prefer to work and the times that they find themselves actually working. Some of this data was taken from Clio's own managed application that tell us that around 20% of lawyers at any point in time are logging in between 7 a.m. and 8 a.m., so before the normal workday. And another 20%, it might be the same, it might be others, are continuing to work after 5 p.m. Now, they aren't all the same people We think, again, this is anonymized aggregate data, but what it does show us is that there's this wide spread of lawyers who are working throughout the day and outside of normal business hours. And very frankly, they're not loving those hours. If you look at the preference for working at 9 p.m. versus the lawyers who are working after 9 p.m., that's a big gap. And what we also see is that lawyers are going above and beyond the normal work week. So they're working on days that are not optional, including Saturday and Sunday. Here, again, we see the days they prefer to work in the darker color and the days that they're actually working, with Friday really being up there in terms of actually working. 45% don't want to work Fridays, 80% do. But there's an unfortunate number of lawyers surveyed who also say that they're working on Saturdays and Sundays. And that really aligns with past research, which tells us that there are lawyers who actually just struggle sometimes to keep up and have to make up that difference elsewhere. If you think about the amount of time that lawyers are spending on administrative work or business development work, the time that they get to be lawyers is often being pushed to the side and being made up on these weekend and after evening hours. And that actually leads to dissatisfaction. Those lawyers who are able to get a handle on their workday and try and find some professional balance actually say that they're doing better than lawyers who aren't. When we ask them about their relationship with clients, with colleagues, and their emotional and mental wellness, lawyers who achieve a regular work week find themselves in a better place than lawyers that don't, in all levels measured here. So revenue contribution to the firm, their own salary. The only place where we really saw a difference was in time management. And so I can see that lawyers who are trying to cram everything into 40 hours a week, time management would be top of mind. But in every other aspect of their lives, they feel better about being a lawyer. So if we know that having a regular working hours is beneficial, but that we're finding a struggle with the time management, the question becomes, what options are there that help lawyers strike a balance? And the solution is that lawyers want to choose the hours in which they work. 76% of lawyers tell us they want to choose which hours of the day that they want to work. And I think this is an important point. There are going to be those days when 7 a.m. or after 6 p.m. will work for you, right? Maybe you have a school event that you need to get to on your kids. Maybe you're a caregiver to an elderly parent. Maybe you just want to go somewhere for lunch that day, right? If you're able to really balance your workday and choose the hours, it's going to be flexible. And that's what's going to make that happen. And interestingly, 49% of lawyers are telling us that they want to work from home. They prefer that. And Clio's own application data is telling us this. The amount of lawyers who are working exclusively from an office has never returned to 2019 details. And again, this is Clio's app data that is reflecting this change on the attitude of how and where lawyers want to work. And what we've seen is that these professionals are just not working exclusively from the office anymore. How did we figure this out? Well, we took a look at a clustering of IP addresses per account. And any IP address that had 3 or more users, we assumed it was an office location, some shared work environment where people came together to work and use the same internet account, basically, the same Wi-Fi. And what we found is in 2020 is that the number of lawyers working from offices really dropped, which makes sense with the lockdown. But interestingly, that number has never recovered back to 2019 levels. And what I think is kind of fascinating is actually non-lawyers also saw a big drop and haven't recovered as well. They've gone from 75% down to 50%. And if there's anything we've seen from surveys is that oftentimes lawyers really want their allied legal professionals like paralegals and legal secretaries to be in the office. And yet we're only seeing half of those that log into Clio doing so exclusively from an office. So how are they working? Well, within the Legal Trends report itself, we see that there are 4 differing groups of law firm office usage. And we see that some are very consistent and some have changed radically. So I do recommend that you read this section. We do have a large group that are only office. Everybody goes to the office every day. That's where they work. Then there is mostly office and mostly digital, and we saw changes between them. And the biggest change we saw is actually that of the hybrid office. This group was about 80% working exclusively from the office, but has now dropped drastically down to about 35% of their time is spent exclusively in the office. And so they have flipped the way that they used to work and are now approaching a distributed by design environment, which is changing the type of lawyers that they might be able to hire. Erin?
So the data shows that lawyers not only want standard days and the flexibility to work remotely, but they are more satisfied in their work when they have this balance. So as employers, as law firms, what can we do? So this slide is showing some of that. And I want to point out too, that prior to COVID forcing location flexibility, cloud-based applications and remote technology options were already taking over as the office standard. And so this technology is just really helping utilize the technology with COVID times and this new work era to really give everybody everything that they want. So in a post-COVID world, there are innumerable options to allow flexible working location. And this is just some of them.
Yeah, I like that you're mentioning focusing on legal-centric apps, because I do think based with the ethical duties of lawyers, on confidentiality and oversight, oftentimes only legal-centric apps include those duties as a part of their workflows to the degree that lawyers have. So I appreciated seeing that on this slide.
Yeah, that's one thing to keep in mind when we are talking about cloud and cloud-based technology, cloud-based applications is everybody wants to jump on that bandwagon. So you do want to make sure that you're vetting companies that work with law firms. It's not just your no more IT guy who wants to stay flexible and relevant and is now offering cloud stuff, but maybe they don't quite know what they're doing. And we'll talk a little bit more about some of that coming up.
Mm-hmm.
So now we're going to cover what consumers are looking for when hiring a lawyer.
Yeah, and if lawyers are looking for flexibility, the ability to work from home, the ability to choose their own hours, is this actually at odds with what clients want from lawyers? Is one of the things that became a question as we dove into the 2022 data. So what we looked at and asked clients and potential clients, we asked them to choose between 6 influences for hiring. So if you're going to hire a law firm, what's really going to tip the scales for you? And reviews dominated 52% out of 100, which is what this all adds up to, was the weight that was given to reviews. And so your Google My Business, your Yelp, and all those places where lawyers are rated by clients and potential clients, they're reading these reviews and they find them very persuasive. And what's interesting is we didn't see a difference between people who are hiring lawyers for their business and people who are hiring lawyers for their personal needs in terms of the influence of reviews. It was very strong. But how does these preferences really tie into location? Well, only 16% of potential clients surveyed said that the location of the firm's office was important. In fact, only 47% of clients preferred that their lawyer live in the same city as them. 37% were actually fine with a lawyer being just anywhere in their state. And another 31% were fine with their lawyer being out of state, so long as they were equipped to handle the matter in front of them. They were appropriately licensed. Only 1%, actually less than that, it was 0.07, were influenced by the office itself. How fancy is your office? So we asked, does it matter if your lawyer has a commercial real estate office versus a home office? And it was virtually tied at 51 to 49%, statistically no different. And so there are clients out there who will work with how you want to work. You want to work from a home office? There are tons of clients who are fine with that. If you need to get out of the house and have commercial real estate, that's great too. And there are clients who prefer that. It's not going to make them hire you, but they'll be fine either way, is the takeaway from that. And do clients really want you to be available outside of normal business hours? We found that some really do have a strong preference for that, but lawyers were mostly aligning with that expectation. So meeting after hours in an office, for example, there's a little over half of clients who prefer that. Same number of lawyers were saying they offer those services. The communications after hours and the communications on weekends were stronger preferences. So it might be more important for you to have communication channels that are open after hours and on the weekends, but that does not mean that you necessarily have to be in the office during those times. And what we found is that was okay with lawyers. 39% of lawyers actually like having a distributed environment be the heart of their law firms. So 39% of lawyers preferred meeting with their colleagues virtually. 45% of lawyers preferred meeting with clients virtually. And as we saw in last year's Legal Trends report, close to 79% of clients actually expect remote options when working with law firms. So if clients aren't really preferring one particular way for a law firm to operate when it comes to locations, then it's what do the lawyers prefer? So the office, as we've traditionally think about it, is no longer the law firm. The law firm is the relationships and the communications between lawyers, their colleagues, and their clients. That's where your law firm now exists. And you've got to figure out a way to capture and build those connections.
So I think the trend of our key takeaway is starting to sink in. Lawyers want flexibility in their hours and work location, and clients want those exact same things. So we're definitely seeing alignment here. So the slide is just showing some technology aspects for client satisfaction, cloud-based document sharing or a client portal, a cloud-based phone system. That's here because if you have a cloud-based phone system, you're not tied to your old desk phone. Cloud-based phone systems, you can usually have an app right on your cell phone, so people aren't having to use their personal phones. They can use their company phone on their cell phone. They can call clients from their cell phone, but it reports as their company phone. So it allows you to be better connected with your clients when you want and when your clients want, and then online scheduling as well. So a couple key takeaways about all of this is you can meet the needs of people who want to work in the office while also meeting the needs of people who want to work remote with these cloud-based options that you can access from anywhere. So it doesn't matter where your staff prefer to work or where your clients want to access their staff. Cloud works for everybody.
Yeah, I really love having cloud-based phone systems. One, it keeps my personal contacts separate from my professional contacts, right? So I don't have to worry about my grandma and my client actually being close to each other in my contacts and sending the wrong thing to the wrong person. And it also logs my calls. And so I can actually capture that time if it's appropriate for that client. So I love cloud-based phone systems. They are the best. I've been using them for, oh my gosh, over a decade now.
See?
Sorry, which, yeah.
Works for everybody.
Yeah.
And I know some people that used to carry around multiple cell phones because people do want that work-life balance. They want that distinction between this is my personal cell phone and this is my work cell phone. And with cloud-based technology, you can merge the two. So you can just have one device that will seamlessly keep that separation for you. So now that we know what lawyers want and we know what clients want, let's take a look at whether these needs, which they do align, but does this result in a successful business?
So what we found when we pull it all together is that cloud using law firms have better relationships with clients than those firms that are not using cloud-based systems. And given that we did this research with both Clio using law firms and non-Clio using law firms, so maybe they're using a competitor, the numbers are really striking when we look at those who are using cloud-based systems, whether Clio or not. 88% of law firms said that they have better relationships with their clients because they have a cloud-based system. 79% said they have a better relationship with their colleagues because they use a cloud-based system. And I got to be honest, I can see where that improves things. You don't have to track down that manila folder on the desk of some partner somewhere when you need to find that one piece of paper that's in it. You can now just look it up in Clio. And of course, that makes things easier. But we also see that personal life, company growth, mental and emotional wellness are all higher for those law firms that are using cloud-based systems. It goes across everything, including salary. And we tried to figure out, like, how is it that law firms are having a better salary or better satisfaction with their salary when they're using cloud-based systems? And I think it's that law firms that use cloud-based systems are actually running better law firms. If we look at client satisfaction, it's greatly higher in firms that are using cloud-based systems. But if we look at employee satisfaction and employee performance, those are uniformly higher as well. And the one that really jumped out to me is revenue. And we have better revenue because we're better able to improve our utilization rate, capture our time, collaborate, and create an environment where lawyers want to work and can work as lawyers. So both inside and outside your law firm, cloud-based legal practice management solutions are the ones that are leading the change in this new work era.
So this was a lot of information in a small amount of time, and we didn't even cover like the bulk of what's in the legal trends report. But in order to make it easier for you to get the most out of this particular session, we're just going to sum up some things that we talked about in this takeaway section here. So work-life balance. Lawyers are making career choices based on when and where they want to work, which means that a law firm leaders need to lean into that. You need to provide flexible working environment to not only attract, but to maintain top talent.
Yeah, that one's really important. And how do you do that? It's you realize that law firms are no longer a location, but are a state of mind. And those law firms that get their mind in the right place are succeeding. Richard Susskind, in his work with courts, is now asking, are courts a place or are they a service? And I think we're seeing a very similar transition happening with law firms themselves, where it's no longer an office or a storefront, but it's a state of mind.
And how can it be a state of mind without that location? So cloud first. So we've established that cloud-based firms are seeing higher rates of employee satisfaction than non-cloud firms. And again, that's not just with Clio users, that's across non-Clio users. So you can be using the cloud with a standard type of software that normally you'd install on a computer. There is private cloud that can help you with that. So there are lots of ways to do this. So not only do law firm leaders need to offer the flexibility and the balance, they need to be offering cloud-based technology tools in order to attract and keep the best and the brightest staff.
And once you have a cloud-first approach that attracts the best and the brightest staff, you're also going to win clients, both in terms of clients that are selecting law firms based on the types of services that they offer, and clients being satisfied with those law firms and then referring you more business. So cloud-first legal wins. That's the conclusion we want you to take away from the 2022 Legal Trends Report. There's a lot more there.
So to get more insight into these data points and more, we've referenced it a few times. There is so much information in here. Go to clio.com/LTR. I know we've already posted a link in the chat. Maybe we can post that up there again, and download your copy of the 2022 Legal Trends Report. Definitely go grab that, explore everything that is talked about in there.
Mm-hmm. And so we'd like to chat about some further resources where you can go and learn more about. There's Clio's offerings. So most of the data that we've seen today is actually derived from Clio Manage. It's our most popular industry-leading solution to manage clients, to organize your case files, and automate tedious tasks like getting paid and month-end billing. In addition to that, we also offer Clio Grow, which is our client intake tool. We found it's had a huge impact in the revenue attributed to law firms. And so please take a look at that. And also Lawya, our document automation tool, which now includes court form libraries for every state in the United States.
That's awesome. And so while Clio is cloud-based, here at Uptime Legal, we provide technology solutions to help law firms manage and grow their practice. We've been providing cloud-based services to law firms for over 10 years, and we were recently announced as Clio's 2022 Partner of the Year. So some of the services that we provide are a private cloud solution, cloud-based legal-centric document and email management, and digital marketing for law firms. I like to say that Uptime has providing cloud and remote work options since before COVID made it cool. So we've been doing it a long time. It's legal-centric. And so there are options out there for people that aren't quite using Clio yet, or maybe you have other software that you need to make cloud-based in addition to your Clio. That's something Uptime can help with. One other resource I did want to point out, and I think our Clio moderator can post a link, is I did do a webinar with Clio earlier this year in May or June, and it was about a legal tech stack. It was aimed more towards new firms, but a lot of what we've covered here, making sure that you're vetting your cloud vendors, making sure they're legal centric, making sure that they have the experience and the reputation. All of that is covered there. So even if you're not a new law firm, I would recommend referencing that if you have more information or want more information about what you should be looking at when you're trying to move toward the cloud.
Yeah, it's actually a really great presentation. So I went and attended it and I learned a lot from it. So thank you, Erin.
Yeah, thank you, Joshua. So the last thing here is we're going to post a poll. And we would really love it if everybody could go ahead and click on what you would like to learn more about, and then we can help follow up with you later.
We'll leave this up for just about a minute.
Yep. And then luckily, it looks like we might have some nice time for Q&A.
Excellent.
I do see that we posted this as a single choice. I certainly don't want to make you choose between the two. So if it's something that you did want to learn about both of these, go ahead and post in the chat. You can post it to the hosts and panelists specifically, and we'll make sure to reach out and talk to you.
Thank you for noticing that.
Yeah.
Okay. Before we jump to questions, I do want to thank the team that makes the Legal Trends Report possible. It is no longer like a single activity that we can just kind of do, but instead is a year-long project where it involves some really deep dives into data, some expertise that some special individuals have contributed, and a continual running narrative that we keep going throughout the years that Clio has been doing this. So this year, I want to thank some amazing people: Amanda, Andrew, Ardo, Bryce, Simona, Sasha, and Nika Kabiri, who have all contributed their time, their expertise, and their energy in framing the research, building the amazing presentations that you see that are part of our annual Legal Trends Report. And I encourage you to go and download your copy so you can really see everything that's being explored here, including the average billable rates for law firms in 2022, different pricing models for lawyers in different practice areas, including non-lawyers, and a whole host of other amazing insight into client preferences. So please download your copy today. That's about all the time we have. We'll jump to questions, but I want to thank you. I'm Joshua Lenon.
And I'm Erin Pickar.
And let's jump to your questions next. Please go ahead and type them in the Q&A. So our first question is actually from Peter, who is asking, can you describe the range of law firms surveyed? Is it applicable for solo, small firms, and large firms specifically? So Peter, that's a great question. And the answer is we actually aim for statistically significant representation. Given the different data sources that we utilize within Clio, it does roughly reflect the percentages of lawyers who are in each of those segments. So for example, solos make up the largest segment of practicing lawyers, in private practice. And so they do make up the largest segment of our application data and our survey responses. But then we also have the small to medium size that are very strongly represented, and big law that's represented in an equal percentage to what they are in the legal profession, which is about 15%. So it is actually highly representative of both solos, small and boutique, and large law firms, all the responses that we've seen today.
Excellent.
Are there any other questions that we can answer? Erin, were there any things that stood out from you as surprising in this year's Legal Trends report?
Well, obviously for me, moving to the cloud isn't necessarily surprising, but it was surprising to me the big difference in utilization rate from just even last year to this year and how much that changed. And to me, that just really shows that even though cloud-based solutions have been around for a long time, law firms are finally starting to truly utilize them and all of the efficiencies they provide. So that was a pretty big takeaway for me.
Yeah, in kind of a hindsight moment, when I looked back at the 2021 Legal Trends report, we found that there are three kind of key features in cloud-based legal practice management that seem to make a difference for law firms. There's the online client intake, there's the client portal and client-centric apps, and then there is online payments. And interestingly, what we saw in 2021 is those law firms that were really growing were obviously using these tools. They've been using them since 2019, but we saw that the gap between them and firms that weren't growing as fast was starting to shrink. And then when we look at the numbers in 2022, that's shown just this total difference in utilization rate. The bar has been raised is probably the best way to describe it. And firms are now like really starting to seize and take advantage of these tools. So the question for me is, what's it going to look like in 2023? Is it going to level off, or are we going to see even more shifts in delegation and technology adoption? And who's going to help them manage that? Like, where's the right investment going to be in terms of time, tech, and energy? So exactly. I'm excited for services like Uptime who are going to help lead the way on that.
Yeah. And an interesting point here. So I used to be a paralegal, and having worked in that industry, I've seen a lot of change as attorneys start to age. So I used to have attorneys that I would work for who would handwrite everything out. And there was a lot of, transcription and things like that. We would even manually enter all of their time. But as younger attorneys enter the field, they've grown up with computers. So they're very used to using them. They don't want to handwrite stuff and have somebody else transcribe it. So I had already seen about 10 years ago, 12 years ago, a change in just it's technology, but it's not how you would think about it, just people's comfort using computers. And so I think with the pandemic, enforcing technology first, because we have to work remote, there's lockdowns, what are we going to do? I think some of those younger minds were able to kind of push some things forward that the older managing partners maybe weren't as familiar or comfortable with. And so I think that we're going to continue to see a growth in that technology adoption that the younger generation has been able to really push forward with.
Yeah, it's a very exciting time to be somebody like me who's researching all of this. So thank you.
Exactly.
Well,
yes.
Oh, well, I think that's about all the time we have today. I want to thank everybody for joining us. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to Erin or I, and we look forward to seeing you at our next joint presentation. Take care, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
That was great, Erin. Thanks so much.
Yes, thank you.